Ever get that feeling like some images just stick with you? You know, they just kind of get burned into your memory.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
For a lot of us, I think the sight of the Twin Towers collapsing on 9/11 is one of those images.
I think so, for sure.
Today, we're going to try to go a bit beyond that image to unpack, all the complexities of 9/11.
Sounds good.
We've got some fascinating stuff to look at. We've got excerpts from some academic articles, some insights from the National September 11 Memorial and Museum,
Oh, wow.
and even a quick peek at how this event is represented on WikiWand.
I didn't even know WikiOne covered that.
Oh, yeah, it's really interesting, actually.
Oh, okay.
So our goal today in this deep dive, I guess, is to really unpack, like I said, the complexities of this event.
Okay.
Explore not just, like, what happened, but why it matters.
Right.
Even decades later,
Yeah.
what can we learn from
I think that's the most important part, really.
it?
Taking those lessons and applying them moving forward,
Absolutely.
especially in today's world.
So to kind of set the stage, remember that incredibly powerful exhibit at the National September 11 Memorial and Museum.
Which one?
The one with those twisted steel beams from the World Trade
Oh,
Center.
yeah.
It's not just like a relic of the destruction. It's like
Yeah.
this stark reminder of the sheer scale of these attacks.
It's crazy how massive those beams are in person.
Right.
Like, it really hits you just how much force was involved.
Falcon destruction. Yeah.
Yeah.
We're talking 4 hijacked planes.
4.
World Trade Center, obviously.
Yeah.
The Pentagon.
Right.
Nearly 3,000 lives lost.
It's just an unfathomable number.
Yeah.
And the fact that WikiWand even covers it extensively,
Right.
that really speaks volumes about its global impact.
They're usually pretty neutral.
Yeah.
Like just the facts.
Right.
But this is like huge for them.
Yeah.
Okay, so to understand the why behind these attacks, I think we need to try to,
Get into the mindset of the perpetrator.
Yeah.
Try to see it from their side, even though it's really hard to,
exactly.
wrap your head around it.
Delve into the perspective of al-Qaeda, the group that claimed responsibility.
Yeah.
And I want to be super clear here.
Sure.
Understanding their perspective is in no way condoning their action.
100%.
Absolutely not.
We're just trying to understand their motivation.
Exactly.
Like, what led them to believe this was the right course of action?
So their arguments really centered around the idea of, like, Western imperialism.
Okay, so they saw the West, particularly the U.S., as this imperial force
Right.
encroaching on their world.
From their viewpoint, Western imperialism wasn't just about military presence.
Right.
It was also about
It was about cultural influence, economic policies,
Right.
support for Israel.
Yeah.
All these things seen as a threat to their vision of an Islamic world.
Yeah, so they saw the U.S. as, like, the embodiment of that threat.
Like the big bad wolf, basically.
Yeah.
The ultimate symbol of what they were fighting against.
And by attacking the U.S.,
They aimed to make a statement.
a really big one.
Yeah, like they wanted to strike at the heart of what they perceived as global dominance.
Right.
They thought that by attacking the U.S., they could somehow weaken its grip on the world.
But it's like, did they really think that was going to work?
I mean, that's the question, isn't it?
It almost sounds,
What were they hoping to achieve?
yeah,
Like, what was the end game?
it's like they wanted to provoke the U.S.
Into a war it couldn't win?
Right.
A war that would ultimately weaken its standing on the world stage.
It's a fascinating point.
It is, but it's also incredibly risky.
Super risky.
Because didn't they anticipate the possibility of massive retaliation?
Right. Yeah.
Like, how could they not see that coming?
well, that's where the
counter-arguments.
counter arguments come.
The other side of the coin.
No matter what grievances somebody has,
You can't...
you can't target innocent civilians.
Exactly.
It's never justifiable.
Yeah, and it's also completely counterproductive.
Really is.
Because all it does is create more suffering.
Yeah, and it violates international law.
Not to mention basic moral principles.
Totally.
Like, how can you even justify that?
And ironically, instead of weakening the U.S.,
It actually had the opposite effect. Like,
Yeah.
it created this huge wave of global sympathy.
and cooperation against terrorism.
Yeah, it really backfired on them in that sense.
Good.
Because it united the world against their cause.
And speaking of the U.S. response, 9/11 really, marked this turning point in U.S. foreign policy.
Oh, absolutely.
It ushered in the era of the war on terror
Yeah.
with the invasion of Afghanistan in 2001.
Which, had its own set of consequences.
Quite consequent,
But it was definitely a direct response to 9/11.
for sure.
They felt they had to do something
Right.
to ensure that they wouldn't be intimidated.
And then, of course, the invasion of Iraq.
Oh, yeah. That was a big one.
Like, think of
That was a direct result of this shift in thinking. This idea of preemptive strikes.
Yeah, eliminate threats before they materialize, which is
Exactly.
still debated today.
Oh, yeah. Huge debate.
It embodies the ongoing debates about, effectiveness,
And the potential dangers.
right, of preemption.
Because, sometimes those preemptive strikes can actually make things worse.
Yeah, for sure.
Like they can destabilize regions
Create power vacuum.
and lead to the rise of even more extreme groups.
Totally.
It's a really tricky situation.
Yeah, and then there's, like, the Patriot Act,
Oh, the Patriot Act. Yeah,
passed in the wake of the attacks.
I remember that.
The National September 11 Memorial and Museum, they highlight this whole debate
What debate?
about the Patriot Act,
Oh, so,
particularly the provision that expanded surveillance power.
right. Like the government was given a lot more leeway.
It raises the question, how much freedom are we willing to sacrifice for security?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? Like,
Yeah.
where do you draw the line? Because on the one hand, you want to keep people safe.
Right.
But on the other hand, you don't want to live in a police state.
Yeah,
It's a tough balance to strike.
it really is.
And it's something we're still grappling with today.
That tension between security and freedom,
Yeah, it's a constant struggle.
Yeah.
Especially in the post-9/11 world.
like this domino effect.
One event triggers another
But-
and another.
Right, and that brings us to, like, the unintended consequences of 9/11.
The ripple effects
Yeah.
we're still feeling today.
For instance, the instability in Iraq after the U.S. invasion.
Yeah. That was a mess.
It arguably created, like, this breeding ground.
For groups like ISIS, who basically exploited the chaos and used it to their advantage.
And we see those ripple effects everywhere, like,
From the rise of Islamophobia to the increased militarization of societies around the world.
right, like,
Whole chain reaction.
totally. And we can't forget the impact on, like, radicalization and recruitment.
Oh, yeah, that's a huge one.
These attacks and the quote-unquote war on terror,
Right.
they became powerful propaganda tools.
For extremist groups all over the world.
Exactly.
They twisted the narrative,
Yeah,
used the events to justify their own violence.
and recruit followers.
Yeah, perpetuating this cycle of extremism.
It's like, what does this all mean for us today? We've seen how understanding the motivations behind the attacks, even though, we condemn them, is crucial.
Absolutely.
We've explored the lasting impact on U.S. foreign policy.
From the war on terror to the debates about its effectiveness and ethical implications.
Right. And we've seen how events like 9/11 can have unintended consequences.
That continue to shape our world even today.
So how do you think this event continues to shape your world?
I don't know, it's a tough one.
I think it's a complex question with no easy answers.
Yeah,
One definitely worth exploring.
for sure. I think we all need to think about these things more.
I think so.
Like, how do these events from the past continue to influence our present and our future?
Right.
And what can we do to learn from them and prevent similar tragedies from happening again?
Exactly, yeah.
It's not easy, but it's important
It's definitely
to
important.
keep these conversations going,
Totally.
to never forget.
Yeah.
And to keep striving for a better world.
I think that's a good place to leave it.
Yeah, I think so too.
Thanks for joining me today.
My pleasure. Always a good chat.
See you next time.
See ya.